Hello, and greetings from Star University. I'm Dr. Robert Brown, president of Star University, and I want to thank you for this honor to be able to speak at the Leaders Institute of Ivory Coast under the chairmanship of Archbishop Koja Guy Vincent. I also am greatly appreciative of the association between Faith Theological Seminary of Africa and Star University, and the friendship I have with Archbishop Floribert Mawitz, who is our Director of Development for French-speaking West Africa. You know, God's blessed me over the years in being in a variety of leadership positions, both religious and secular, as a professor, academic dean, provost, pastor, and now president. And I want to briefly share a couple of things, lessons I've learned about being a leader and about leadership and how they're being applied at Star University and what I know through Bishop Mawitz at Faith Theological Seminary of Africa. A few years ago, it became popular among business consultants guiding future business leaders in to use the term servant leadership to describe how future business leaders should see themselves. And it's still a popular term and somewhat relevant today. However, many don't know that the term really originated over 2,000 years ago. And it came from the best example of a leader to ever walk this planet. And that was Jesus Christ. In fact, Matthew, in his gospel, recorded an event and a time in which Jesus, as he was preparing his 12 disciples to be future leaders, and believe me, when he first called them to be his disciples, they were anything but leaders, and they had to go through an extensive 3.5-year period of training to become leaders, and it didn't stop even after Jesus left. They still went through quite a time and period of learning to be leaders. But Matthew recorded that Jesus told them, and this is not too long before he was to leave, he said, yes, you're going to be leaders, but you're not going to be a leader like the world understands leadership. And you know, it's still true today. If you want to be a good leader, whether it's in a church or whether it's in a community, or even if it's in your family, if you want to be a good leader, you don't want to look to the world as a model of what leadership is all about. Jesus says, among you, it will be different. It's not going to be the way the world understands leadership. For he says, whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave. Well, that definitely is not the way it works today. If you're wanting to be a leader, it's all about how many people can you get to do what you want to do. It's not about how many people you can serve, it's how many people can serve you. But Jesus said, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many. There was a president, former president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who once said that it's a terrible thing to look over your shoulder when you're trying to lead and find no one there. Let me say that again. He said it's a terrible thing to look over your shoulder when you're trying to lead and find no one there. Well, there would be many would-be entrepreneurs and future business leaders who are looking for the right products that are going to get them rich. But they have it wrong. Instead, they should be going to people to see what their greatest needs are, rather than seeing how many people they can get to come to them to give them their money. They need to be figuring out instead what can they be doing, what kind of products or what kind of services can they be providing that are meeting the needs of people. Jesus never had to launch a media campaign or convince people to come follow him, but yet multitudes followed him. And why? Because he first went to them. He went to them and he met their needs where they were. He met their needs both physically and spiritually. At Star University, in deciding what programs we would begin to offer a few years back, we didn't look to see first what programs could generate the largest profit margins for us. Instead, we spent a lot of time in Africa among community leaders, pastors, tribal chiefs, letting them tell us what they and their community and their congregants needed. And out of those conversations came certification programs designed to meet those needs. Programs that came at a price point and within a time frame that would be accessible to the individuals that we were wanting to serve. Faith Theological Seminary of Africa, again, following the same principles, the same goals, are meeting the goals and needs of those wanting to go into leadership as ministers. At Star University, we're doing much the same thing, except we're trying to meet the goals and the needs of those wanting to be leaders in entrepreneurship, using the technology now that's becoming more and more accessible in Africa, in digital media, social media marketing, in video production. In fact, we just finished a video production certification program in Pakistan. We are offering a digital, and we just finished a digital media program in a very rural community in Nigeria, in Egbe. In fact, that's part of what we were beginning to understand, is that the technology is spreading so much that we can begin to offer programs using the latest technology, certification programs that can be accomplished in months, and in some cases in concentrated forms, even in days, that can help people, even in rural communities, find jobs, find the talent and skills and tools that they need, in which they don't even need to move to large metropolitan areas. They don't even need to move out of the country, but they can find jobs and employment with companies in Europe, or even in the United States, or even with other countries in Africa. It's all about being able to not only use the technology, but know how to use the technology to find the jobs. And again, that's what we're trying to do, is find those programs that help meet those needs. Well, let me tell you a second thing that I learned about leadership, and it's about being a learner. If you're going to be an effective leader, whether it's in your church, your community, your business, or even in your family, you've got to become an effective, lifelong learner. You say, well, that's obvious. Well, I don't know. Maybe not so much. I want to direct you to what the Bible tells us about learning. Let's read in 1 Kings, the 4th chapter and the 29th verse. It says, God gave Solomon very great wisdom and understanding and knowledge, as vast as the sands of the seashore. And we all know that Solomon is the second smartest, wisest man on this planet. Say second? Yes, because Jesus said a greater than Solomon is here. So what does that scripture tell us in 1 Kings? First off, that it's God. It's God that grants the wisdom, the understanding, and the knowledge. But that he grants those three things, and learning comes as a set of three. It comes as knowledge, and it comes as understanding, and it comes as wisdom. And you need all three. And let me briefly explain how those are different. And then we're going to talk about how Paul says all three of those are important if you really want to be effective. First off, there's knowledge. And what is knowledge? Knowledge is just simply being aware of something that is. And let me use an example of an automobile. We're all familiar with automobiles. If I was able to walk with you to a street corner and I asked you to point out an automobile, I'm sure you would be able to do so. You'd be able to say, yes, there is an automobile. Well, that's possessing the knowledge of what an automobile is. And I'm sure you would be able to then express understanding of what you can do with an automobile. If I ask you, well, what can you do with that automobile? Would you know how to start it? Would you know how to drive it? Would you know how to stop it? Would you know how to turn it from left to right? You would probably say, yes, I can do that. I understand how to use that knowledge to go from one place to another. So that's understanding. You have knowledge of an automobile. You have understanding of how an automobile operates and works. You can put that knowledge to work for you because of your understanding. But then there is, most importantly also, wisdom. Can you put that understanding to use in such a way, apply it in such a way that you can get from one place to another safely without killing yourself or someone else? And now I can tell you, I have knowledge and I have understanding of an automobile, and I have wisdom to be able to operate an automobile here in the streets of Muskogee, Oklahoma, here in the United States. But I've been in Douala, Cameroon on more than one occasion. And whereas I have knowledge and understanding of an automobile in Douala, I do not have wisdom to operate an automobile in Douala because I understand how they drive in Douala. I do not drive in Douala, Cameroon. I always have someone else, whether it's my good friend Floribert or one of his good friends, drive me around Douala. They drive very differently. They drive, in my mind, crazy. They have a different wisdom there when it comes to driving that I don't have. And I could not drive there. And you need that kind of wisdom to be able to go from one place to another in Douala. And now Paul says, as he is writing to the church, to the Christians at Colossae in the book of Colossians, he says, you know, you still got to have all three. In fact, he said when Paul, he was in prison when he found out that there was a new church started in this community called Colossae. And so he wrote a letter to them. And it's what we know as the epistle or the letter to the Colossians. And one of the first things he wanted them to know is that I am praying for you continually that God gives you three things. He wanted God to give them three things. He said, I'm praying that God gives you by His Spirit. He gives you knowledge, and He gives you understanding, and He gives you wisdom. Why? Well, as you read in Colossians, the first chapter, starting in the 9th verse, where again, Paul says, all of this comes from God. And again, the beginning, as Solomon wrote in Proverbs, the beginning of wisdom, what comes from God, begins with the fear of the Lord. All knowledge, understanding, and wisdom comes from God. That's what we read in 1 Kings. That's what Paul is writing to the Colossians. That's why he said, I'm praying to God continually, because that's where it comes from. It comes from God. If you're wanting to be a leader, you've got to be a learner. You must have knowledge, understanding, and wisdom in those things that matter. Whether you're a leader in the church, or whether you're a leader in a business, or a community, or in your family. And Paul says, once you have those things, how can you know? He says, first off, in this letter, here in the first chapter, he says, you're going to live a life that's worthy. You're going to live a good life. You're going to live a life that's blessed by God. In fact, he goes on and he says, you're going to live a life that's worthy and a life that pleases the Lord in every way. You see, it's when you gain knowledge and understanding and wisdom, and that's why it's so important. In everything you do, you begin to live a life that's pleasing to the Lord. And Paul says there's four things that follow from that. And let me briefly touch on that, because it's important to you as you want to step out and be a leader. He says, first off, you're going to bear fruit in every good work. You're going to be successful in every good thing you do. What is a good work? Every work that benefits others. If you build furniture so that other people can use it, if you build chairs that people can rest their bodies on, or beds that they can rest their bodies on at night, that's a good work. If you are a farmer and you plant and harvest food that people can eat and nourish their bodies with, that's a good work. If you're a doctor and you help heal people, that's a good work. If you're a retailer and you help sell goods that people can buy that benefit them, that's a good work. Anything that benefits others for their good is a good work. And God says you have knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. You'll have success. You'll find success in every good work. It says you're also going to grow in the knowledge of God. And why is that important? You want to be a leader? You want to be a leader in this life? Then you need to know more and more about that, about the one that is the creator of this life. The more you know of God, the more you know of this life. And then he goes on to say that also with knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, you'll find strength. Strength to have all power. Oh, that's something we all want. In the world, that's how people define leadership. It's to have power. How do you identify a leader? You find someone that has power. That's how the world defines leadership. And Paul says, yes, power is important. But what kind of power? Paul said, you're going to have power, yes. But it's going to be the power, he says here, to have endurance and patience. Endurance and patience. You can't be a good leader if you don't have patience. You cannot be a good father in a family if you don't have patience. You can't be a good mother. You cannot be a good boss if you don't have patience. You cannot be a good employee if you don't have patience and endurance. You can't be a good leader. That's the kind of power. If you want to be a good leader, that's the kind of power you need to be able to endure, to be able to have patience. And the more knowledge and understanding and wisdom you have, that's what you need to learn. That's what you need to pursue, the more power that you have. And then last, he says, you are going to find that the more knowledge and understanding and wisdom you have, the more joy you have, the more joyful thanks you have. Yeah? What do you do when you give someone a present? What do you do? The first thing you do is when you give someone a present, you look at their face, you look at their eyes. Why? Because you want to find out if you can see a clue as to whether or not they really are thankful. If there's that big smile that comes on their face, you hopefully are looking for a sign that, yes, they really enjoy what you gave them. They're really thankful for what you gave them. It's not, well, thank you, I appreciate it. No, they like it. It's joyful thanks. Well, again, you want to find a true leader. A true leader is someone that through knowledge, the gaining of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, the more they've gained in knowledge and understanding and wisdom, the more they truly have found joyful thanks. The more they have really come to appreciate what they really have. And let me close with this. And why? Paul said, what's the end result of all this knowledge, gaining and learning of knowledge and understanding and wisdom that we can find and gather and acquire? It's the realization that we've been rescued. We've been rescued from the dominion of darkness, and we've been brought into a kingdom, a new kingdom, the kingdom of the Son, Jesus Christ, who loves us, in whom we have redemption and forgiveness of sins. And I want to ask you a question in closing. Have you found that redemption? Have you found that forgiveness? Because that's where knowledge begins. As we've said before, all knowledge comes from God. And the knowledge of God begins with the understanding of His forgiveness. For God so loved the world that He gave His Son. That's the beginning of knowledge. And if you have not experienced the forgiveness of Jesus Christ in your life, then you have not yet begun to really know what your life can really be. And I challenge you now, I encourage you, even where you are at this moment, it's as simple as saying, Jesus, forgive me of my sins. I accept you as my Savior. I repent of what I have been, and I am now open to what you can make me as I grow more and more in the knowledge and understanding and wisdom of who you are. You have that prayer in your heart, you immediately begin to be a new person. Again, I want to thank so much the opportunity to be with you and to share in this institute. God bless you. I pray that as you continue, God's blessings will continue to be in this event. We at Star University are supportive of what you're doing in the Ivory Coast, and we, along with Faith Theological Seminary of Africa, stand with you and support you and look and believe in great things that God is doing in Africa and in the world. God bless you.